Hey guys, it's Thorn. Hadn't spoken to anybody in a while, and I thought it was high time that I made a video. So, this is me doing that. And I want to start out by apologizing because there's a fair chance that there will be quite a bit of incoherency in this video in particular because it is 3 billion degrees outside, and my air conditioning isn't working, and I'm very sad. And I wasn't able to get an appointment until Thursday, and I'm really hot and it's not okay. So there's nothing else to do because I don't feel like writing or anything. I sort of am just ready to start pouring ice into the bathtub and just lay in it with cocktails. I could actually just sort of immerse the vodka in the bath with me in ice, and I think that might be the only solution that I have available to me right now. So given that I was feeling a little bit murderous, and by was I mean am, I thought it would be fun to talk about curses and hexing and some of the nastier stuff, just because, you know, this subject comes up all the time, everywhere, no matter where you are, if it's in real life or it's on the internet or whatever. And I was reading a thread on Reddit this morning. Somebody asking about the Gardnerian position on cursing. And as with all things, there's no such thing as the Gardnerian perspective because we are legion, and people form their own opinions because we all possess, or hopefully, brains and the capacity to make decisions for ourselves. So, this is not me representing the Gardnerian position or even the Wiccan position. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit from where I'm standing about those sorts of things. But before I do that, a little bit of shameless whoring. The second issue of The Burning Times is out, and I'm really excited about it. Laura surprised me with the final version. She's the graphic designer and frankly the brains behind this. So the reason it's awesome is really because of her. But she surprised me with it on May Eve, and it's amazing. There's a centerfold, and the first 100 issues have a trading card, a full color hand-numbered trading card. I did the hand numbering, so that was my contribution, aside from some of the serious and more boring articles. But there's lots of, just like the last one, there's lots of fun stuff in here. There's plenty of satire. Actually, sort of the most amusing commentary that we got from our last issue was, you know, I really just couldn't tell where you were kidding and where you were serious. And I think that's spectacular. So if you want your copy, you can buy it on Etsy. There's a link below. And you can do that. And there's a curse in it. So if you're curious, there. Okay, anyway, so back to what I was saying. One of the big kind of divides that exists, or would appear to exist, between Wicca and what gets called traditional witchcraft is this idea that Wiccans are bound by the Threefold Law and the Wiccan Rede and all this other sort of ethical stuff. I'm distracted because I can hear the ice cream man outside, and he's looking really good right now, to go along with my vodka bath that's going to happen when I'm done with this video. Anyway, Wiccans are supposedly bound by all of these really strict kind of moral regulations that traditional witches, at least the traditional witches on Tumblr, don't necessarily see there being a lot of sense in. And there have been several folks recently who have dissected the Wiccan Rede and the Threefold Law much better than I could, and it's not a subject that I really want to, you know, go into depth about just because I've done it in other videos. But suffice it to say that the Threefold Law and the Wiccan Rede are a lot more complicated than how they normally look on #Wicca on any social media platform, and they are not universal or inherent to Wicca, period. What I'm telling you is that there are Wiccans out there who actively ignore both of those things, and they remain Wiccan regardless. I will include at least one, probably 2 or 3 articles for your perusal below for elaboration. But the Threefold Law, I made a whole video about this a few years ago. The Threefold Law, as it's normally described in popular sources, is completely nonsensical, and it's something that I disregard. The idea that there's actually equal sort of consequences based in some kind of divine notion of justice is just like obviously not true. Like, you can just read a newspaper. And anyway, so, and as for the Read of the Witch-A, what people have come to think of as the Wiccan Read is really an edition that doesn't appear until several decades after Wicca has been established. And often you don't see it in traditional forms of Wicca, and I'm a-okay with that. So, cursing and hexing, etc. Now that we're 6 minutes into it, I'm dehydrating actively right now. To me, witchcraft is fundamentally about transgression. I think witches exist in this kind of liminal space, or at least have access to that liminal space. That's why so many witches use the phrase hedge crossing, this idea that you cross from one world, our sort of mundane everyday world, and into the spirit world, or even literally transgress into past boundaries of social norms, right? I mean, we're talking about a kind of law breaking, fundamentally, when you're looking at particular eras, particularly in European history. We're talking about legality here. We're talking about, I mean, witchcraft is taboo, right? It's about transgression. It's about crossing boundaries. It's about going beyond the norms. Witchcraft, I've said this in my blog, there's something that's fundamentally scary about witches and witchcraft. You can sort of look at witch lore and witch history pretty much everywhere, and there's lots of disagreement about what a witch is and who a witch is, but generally speaking, one thing that you can be fairly certain of is that witches are not people who you're supposed to want to hang out with. There's something about them that is, I mean, maybe, you know, there's varying degrees of that. Even witches who are described as benevolent are still people who live outside of the village. So the idea that witches are anyone and everyone, and anyone can just practice witchcraft, and Wicca's just another religion, and blah, 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 like, that stuff really has never sat well with me, because I don't feel like what I'm doing is the equivalent of what people are doing when they're in church or going to some other kind of temple. So because witchcraft is transgressive, I feel like cursing and hexing and talking to the dead and all of these things that are, you know, the stuff that so many contemporary witches try to persuade other people that witches don't do. Like, oh, well, real Wiccans would never curse. Real Wiccans would never, you know, try to take control of spirits or whatever. I mean, those are positions that plenty of people hold, and that's fine, but they're just not true. Like, witches do those things. Maybe you don't, and that's fine. You can absolutely think that it's immoral and awful, but the reality is that there are witches out there who do that, and it doesn't make them not witches. It just makes them witches that you don't like or don't want to hang out with, which is fine. So all of that stuff is part of witchcraft, like it or not. And personally, I have practiced cursing, hexing, etc. That is, I think all that stuff is fair game. And me being dismissive of popular conceptions of the Threefold Law and the Read are not to say that I don't think that there are consequences, only that I don't believe in some kind of divine justice that makes perfect sense in the end, right? Like, I don't subscribe to the idea of karma, for example. So when I go into a curse, I understand that there are ramifications, potentially. Although, to be honest, I haven't experienced any. And that, like I said, that's fair game. When I have done cursing, it's been in circumstances where I was threatened or I felt like I couldn't get out of situations that were particularly nasty. But you know, I've also done things just to sort of mess with people I don't like. You know, even it's Meaning of Witchcraft, I'm pretty sure, but Gerald Gardner kind of makes a quip in passing about witches being jokers and leg pullers. And I think that there's this idea of like magical pranks that I think could potentially fall into the realm of hexing and cursing. And I've seen interesting examples of that online. But you know, not all curses are there to bring people to justice or to kill people or whatever. Sometimes, you know, you might just hex somebody so that they can't find their keys ever. You know? I brought over an example of it's not an active curse, but it's something that I made last year. I found an idea for this on Tumblr. I thought it was really fun and interesting, and so I modified it a little bit. But basically, it's a cursed jar, and it's painted and inscribed with particular symbols of significance to me personally. But the premise behind this jar is that it's about scrutiny. Okay, the idea that you could trap somebody in a position where they were always being observed, and it's filled with googly eyes. It's a jar just filled with fucking googly eyes, and it's spooky all by itself, right? Like this noise, that's spooky. Okay, and something like this potentially has a few functions. On the one hand, at the bottom. On the one hand, you could use it on somebody who you needed to find something out. Like, you could use it essentially to spy on somebody, perhaps. You know, having all eyes pointed on that person at all times. Perhaps if you were trying to bring somebody to justice, or if you were trying to find out something critical for a court case or something like that, something like this might be useful. You could use it on somebody who you knew was really insecure. You know, there's a certain kind of weakness that's related to always being observed. People don't like it when they're stared at. And so you could sort of modify things for something like that. I already said you could use it if you wanted to find stuff out about somebody. Maybe some kind of, I think a jar like this would be perfect for something like a politician. If there was somebody who you wanted there to be a lot of focus on, you know, something like this is potentially an interesting way to bring about somebody's undoing. And as a witch, you can be really creative about it. I've got another variation on this that's made with mirrors, the idea being obviously reflecting, where on the one hand, right, like everything they put out comes back at them. But, you know, mirrors are kind of horrible. Like, most of us have really poor relationships with our own images, whether that's our physical bodies or our perceptions, how we think other people perceive us. Like, there's a lot of people are really insecure about that sort of thing. So again, there are all of these possibilities where mirrors are concerned and cursing. And I'm a big fan of the wax effigy. I've held funerals before for people who I've needed out of my life, out of my space, or frankly dead. And while, to my knowledge, nobody's actually died, you know, those have been successful in the sense that these people are gone now. And I'm unapologetic about that. You know, I think there's this attitude, this is its own video really, but there's this there's this attitude that niceness is somehow a Wiccan virtue, right? As Wiccans, we're supposed to love everybody and be tolerant, and that just isn't the case. Actually, like, if you really wanted to talk about, like, Wiccan values, we could talk about, like, secrecy and discretion and, you know, things that aren't nice, per se. It's never been my goal to be nice. I think, that's not to say that I think something like kindness isn't something to aspire to, but my kindness comes out of my moral compass as a decent human being. It's not because I'm a Wiccan. And I think there's this tendency in wider witchcraft spaces, non-Wiccan witchcraft spaces, to assume that because one is Wiccan, one is incapable of darker work, or you know, there's this like Wiccans are meek or something like that, and that's really bizarre to me, because that's never been my experience with Wicca, particularly once I began traditional training. Like, these were not people who were telling me, you know, oh, well, the Read says that you can't curse, because that's actually just not what the Read says, first of all. But then that just isn't necessarily even a part of what I'm doing. So there's Oliver. This is the first time Oliver's moved in several hours, because he's also really hot. Aren't you? So this video was long enough, I think, and it's just about time for that vodka ice bath. So everybody enjoy your evening, and I will see you later.